try to make it as personal and uncomfortable as it possibly is, if it weren't for the lights, which are already blinding. So, you guys know each other for how long?
Since the late 80s.
Late 80s. So, and you have been working together since then, or was it like a work relationship, or like a friend relationship that became like a work relationship?
I knew John because he opened the first comic shop in Belfast. And when I was pitching a story to a British publisher, I asked him to do some art for it. He did. The story was picked up. John was the artist, and we've been working together on and off ever since, really. That would have been the spring of '89.
Jeez, I can't even count it how long that is. you probably both have a relationship that lasted a lot less than that. So what was the first thing you worked on?
It was called Troubled Souls, and it was a political drama set in Northern Ireland, where of course we grew up. And it was published, first of all it was serialized in a political comic called Crisis, and then it was a collection, it was a graphic novel, and I always thought that having a 100-page full-color graphic novel as your first effort, I think it did us both a lot of good. A lot of publishers, especially in America, saw it, and it gave us a nice sort of running start.
Okay, so, and then the first big American thing the two of you did was Demon, right? You did like a longer...
That's right, yeah, we took over the Demon from Alan Grant and Val Zemeckis, who'd been doing it for about 30 or 40 issues, and then we took over and ran it into the ground, really.
How did you get away with a lot of the stuff that was there? I mean, to have a character called Bader, who's usually referred as Master Bader.
Well, we didn't get away with that for the longest time. That whole joke was ruined when they figured it out. There was meant to be a double-page splash with all the demons from hell sort of screaming, "All hail the Master Bader," to which we would chuckle enormously. But they caught it at the last minute and changed it to "All hail King Bader," which ruined it entirely.
It did a bit. I remember the editor telling me that he went into his boss and asked him if they could do it, and the boss said no. And then he went back again a day later and asked again, and this time he got a really filthy look that told him his job was on the line, so he just backed off. But about 20 years later, when it was collected, I gave the collections editor a bottle of whiskey, and he changed King to Master, and all is well.
Beautiful, beautiful. And it grew into one of the best characters and one of the best series ever published by DC in the 90s, Hitman. That is probably like one of the longest forms the two of you worked together, right? Like 60 issues and some specials. How do you maintain a relationship? Like relationships are hard with anyone. Like for 60 issues, that's more than 5 years. How do you maintain a relationship like that?
It's fairly simple, really. It's just trust. Neither of us does anything that the other will find impossible. We're both pretty professional about it, and we keep each other entertained.
Was there anything that he's ever written that you said, like, I'm not going to draw that?
You've seen the stuff I draw? So, no. Nah.
And vice versa, did he ever drew anything that you just went like, John?
No, I mean, there's been a couple of times I've gone, oh fuck. There was a Dick's cover where one of the lead characters was being forced to blow the devil, and it was a close-up. I think the devil is holding mistletoe over, and I remember when I because I didn't know about the cover, and I remember when I opened the box and thought, oh Christ, this has come through British customs. We could be arrested for this. But no, I don't think I've ever had any art on any of the things I've written where I thought that's gone too far. You know, certainly I can tell you that I run into my own limits sometimes before I do other people's, like the publisher of Dix and Crossed and many other titles, William Christensen, seems to have absolutely no limits whatsoever, and some of the things I think he would like to publish go way, way beyond anything I can imagine.
Well, when you sent me over Crossed, some comps of Crossed to have a read of them, I read maybe 5 or 10 pages of the first issue and then just shut the book and went, that's enough of that. I read comics to be entertained, not chilled to my very core and this kind. So I just took them down to the comic shop and traded them in. Sorry, it was just too much for me.
That's perfectly fine. I mean, I can tell you that some of the other writers on Crossed, after we opened it up to other people, did go further than I would have. But that's just the luck of the draw. You know, when the whole point of creative freedom is to follow your instincts to where the story is supposed to go.
Do you have personal, so just going back, and I will talk about Crossed in a second because I want to give it a shout out to Horsecock because that character is just amazing. But do you have, like, from Hitman, you have like a personal favorite, like some character that's just, you know, that's a personal favorite?
Well, for me, it's either Six-Pack or Baitor. You know, both those characters are very close to my heart. You know, I love them both.
I'm not sure if I could pick a favorite. Six-Pack and Baitor, both good. Fond of Dog Welder. Bueno, I've got a soft spot for. Tommy himself is a very, very easy character to write because his essential instinct is to go get a beer, prop up a bar, and hope that nothing interrupts his day. I can really relate to that.
So Hitman, and this is not just my personal opinion, but I think it has one of the best comic book series endings ever. It's like you're not human if it doesn't bring some tears into your eyes because it's just one of the perfection. Did you like when was the moment that you guys knew like you have like a hit on your hands?
Well, let's see. It launched about 30 years ago. In the summer, yes, it was the summer of '96, and I think things were going quite well for me at that time. Preacher and Unknown Soldier and a couple of other things, and Star seemed to be on the rise, I suppose. Hitman didn't do as well as Preacher, but it did well enough to survive 60 issues, and I had the impression that people who liked it straight away, and anyone who didn't like it just dropped it. So we didn't have to worry about a sort of a fan base that maybe wavered with it. They were kind of with it all the way. But once we realised that it was going to survive long enough to tell the story we wanted to tell, then I could sort of start to plan things out. And the ending that you're talking about, I think I thought of that fairly early on, really just because there is an aspect of the story of live by the gun, die by the gun. And I think that was something I always knew I was going to have to work into the ending.
All right. And also that issue 34 brought you the Eisner, right? So as a best single issue, the one with Superman on the rooftop, also really it's an instant classic. This one's mainly for you, Garth. Let's talk a little bit about Hellblazer, because that was your, if I can say, I'm sorry if I say, because you already did Judge Dredd by that time in the UK, so you were quite well known in the UK. But that was the big American break, right?
Yes.
How did you approach it? Like, because you had to follow some giant footsteps, because you had Alan Moore creating the character in Swamp Thing and establishing, and then Jamie made this into this murky, dark, like basically, it could have been a happy ending, but he just always took like, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
So how do you go from that to make it even worse?
Well, I think I felt the need to make an impression as quickly as possible. I was 20 when I began work on that book, and I felt very obviously like the new kid. And I thought, and I was a huge admirer of what Jamie did on the book, still am. I think he picked up on just the right clues that Alan left in the character. But yes, I just felt the need to make a big splash as quickly as possible and get noticed. And fortunately, it worked.
Do you have like a favorite one? I mean, I think everyone's like, what everyone knows is when John's giving the finger to the demons. But you have like something that sticks out that you're very proud of that you did. Like yeah, that's me.
Probably the character of Kit. Everybody seemed to like her, and it was good to write a female character that I felt was a match for Constantine. You know, she was his equal, if only because she had the intelligence to run like hell as soon as trouble came along. Because I think when you're talking about someone like Constantine, he's essentially a very dangerous person to know. Spend much time in his company, and you will eventually suffer a nasty, grisly fate. Whereas Kit, I think, although she was attracted to him, she probably saw him more as probably being a bit like a drug. You know, like, this is fun, but I know that trouble's going to come along, and I have to know when to get out of this. And she had the intelligence to do that.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about Punisher, because I think everyone here is a huge fan of your work, both runs. It's such an interesting thing because you did two very massive long runs on Punisher, and they're like written by two completely different people. Because one of them is just crazy bear punching, grizzly bear, polar bear punching, the mobster throwing off the top of the building kind of fun, and the other one is just that serious and touches some insanely difficult subjects like human trafficking and war. Like how do you, and this is for you, John, because you drew some of the most craziest issues of the first run with that's going to fumble that. So the Confederacy of Dunces, which is just one of the stupidest, and I'm saying it with affection, it's just one of the stupidest Punisher stories with steamrollers
and on art.
Over the top.
Stupid enough to draw this.
So how did you, when did you know, like, I want to finish this and I want to start something completely different?
It was actually around the time of 9/11 in New York when I had a strong sense of suddenly this new world, this new century being ruined, and understanding that between the event itself and the Bush administration's reaction to it, things were going to get bad. And that sort of optimism of the 90s was going to give way to something pretty grim. And I thought, well, I have the perfect character with which to write about this, the Punisher. It wasn't that I wanted to write about the events, the specific events and causes of 9/11, but I wanted to write about a world in which things like that happened, when the cavalry wasn't coming over the hill, when no one was coming to save you, when it turns out, things are just going to get pretty shitty. And I mean, you mentioned the human trafficking. The Punisher was a pretty good character to write in a story like that.
I think that's one of my go-to issues. I think the end of the Slavers, the first issue, ended when Frank says, like, I'm going to go out and hurt like a lot of people tonight, where you, like, the rare time where I have a problem when people identify with the Punisher, like being the good guy. I always find it scary because he's not. He's a psycho. He's just as bad. But there's always that certain nuance where you feel like, okay, yeah, he's right this time.
Well, yes, it's the classic notion, I suppose, of making the villains significantly worse than the anti-hero, so that at the back of your mind you are thinking, yeah, they do deserve it, and I would like to see them get taken out. I remember actually why that story came about was my wife and I were walking through Central Park, and I happened to mention to her that I wasn't quite sure what to do next with the Punisher. I don't know who to set him loose on next. And she said, you know, I've just read something that I think you might find interesting. And it was an article about human trafficking. It was only 3 or 4 pages long. There's a sequence in the story where there's a social worker giving a lecture on the topic, and she cites a few examples. They're all taken directly from that article. But I remember reading it, and I'd heard of human trafficking before. I knew what it was, but I didn't know the details. And I think it was reading that when I thought for the first time, yes, I would like there to be a Punisher. I would like there to be someone who could be unleashed on people like this, because this is human depravity at its vilest. But that's where that story comes from.
Hard subject, so this is going to be very tough to go to some more light-hearted adventures.
The other Punisher, the one you're talking about that John drew the last 5 issues of, that was very much born of its time, the 1990s, when there didn't seem to be any particular reason to take a violent character like that all that seriously.
Yeah.
And the notion of Frank, like, basically working his way through the Marvel universe like a chainsaw, and mercilessly denigrating all the Marvel characters. Well, that just seemed like fun. When you come from, I have an unusual background in comics in that I don't have a superhero background. Although John and I grew up only about 5 miles apart, by a quirk of distribution, I very rarely saw superhero comics. Not with any kind of continuity or coherence. I never read them as a kid. So I have a completely different background in comics than most other people. The first American superhero comic I read cover to cover was The Dark Knight, which is a weird way to come to the subject, especially when you realize that none of the other comics are remotely like it.
That's so. And does it, like, do you have any say, or you when you're writing a story, like, okay, this one's for John? You have that in your mind somewhere?
Well, that one was specifically written for John, actually, because he was, I think at the time you were looking for work at Marvel, and Joe Quesada said, why don't you write him a Punisher? But what I want you to do is I want you to fill it, I want you to take all the superhero characters from your Punisher run and put them in one story. So that was like Spider-Man and Daredevil and Wolverine,
yeah,
who had all sort of been through the ringer in previous issues. And I knew John liked the Hulk, so I stuck the Hulk in there too.
Yeah, I mean, the Spider-Man is my favorite superhero, and I loved Spider-Man growing up as a kid, and I'll never forgive you.
Well, I remember that there was an excellent editor in American comics called Archie Goodwin, very good writer as well. But I remember, maybe you're familiar with a book called Martial Law.
Of course.
Right, Martial Law.
Kevin O'Neill, rest in peace.
Yeah, just fantastic. Martial Law, of course, is far more vicious about superheroes than anything I've ever written. I mean, it really stamps them into the dirt. And Archie, who was the editor, said that he felt a bit weird about it, because he said that making fun of somebody's favorite superhero is a bit like calling their mother a whore. And of course, you know, there are people who take it that seriously. I've always, with that Punisher material and Hitman and The Boys, which are all fairly, you know, anti-superhero, I've always found that there are people who, yes, really enjoy the adventures of their favourite superhero characters, but also quite enjoy seeing them mocked. And it's that audience, I suppose, that I kind of rely on.
Definitely. Moving on. So the other book that was a huge hit before The Boys was Preacher.
Mhm.
Preacher also became this massive TV show, but before that, quite a few years, it was like one of the, it's probably the longest book you've ever written, like 66 issues plus all these...
I think The Boys is longer.
It is?
Yeah, I think so. The Boys comes out at almost 100.
Wow. Sorry. See, there's my
Yeah,
knowledge.
Preacher was about, I think when you add it all up, it's about 75.
So, Preacher, to me, is basically a romantic comedy. It's a road movie. It's on its heart. It's a very romantic, comic book that is also like hilariously violent and just over the top in many, many things. I remember, so I was one of those that still read the floppies and read all the letter columns as well. So is it true that you actually send it to different church groups, or is that a legend?
No, that's a different title actually. What I think you're talking about is the next book I did after Troubled Souls with John back at the beginning was called True Faith, and it was serialized in Crisis, and then it was published as a graphic novel. And the guy who did publicity for Crisis was an American guy living in London called Igor Goldkind. And he thought it would be a good idea to send copies of True Faith, which was pure blasphemy, I should explain, like a sort of prototype Preacher. He thought it would be a good idea to send copies of the graphic novel to every Christian group and church in the UK. And, well, he certainly got plenty of attention, and the thing was promptly withdrawn from sale. And it remained lost in limbo for about 10 years, and then Vertigo eventually published it. But yes, certainly, the seeds of Preacher lay in True Faith, but True Faith was the one that got sent to various churches. Yeah.
Okay, I will need to make a note for that for myself. Let's talk a little bit about The Boys. So The Boys is right now one of the biggest hit shows on, I don't even dare to say television because I don't think that exists anymore, but basically but it's one of the biggest. Did you think like this is going to become that huge thing, or?
Whenever someone asks that really about anything I've done that succeeded, I always say that no, its success didn't surprise me because I can see why people like it, but equally, if it had fallen flat, if it had failed, I would have understood that too. That's very much true of Preacher. Preacher, yes, I can see why people like it, but if it had failed, I would have gone, yes, it's just too weird. I get that. When Steve and I began Preacher, we had no idea what was going to happen. The Boys, I can see why people like it. I think it was very fortunate that the show came along when it did, because by then, all the Marvel and DC films and TV shows had educated a mainstream audience, meaning an audience beyond comics, to the notion of a shared superhero universe, to the idea that you could live in a world where you'd be walking down the street and Spider-Man would swing past, and suddenly the Hulk would burst out of a building and Doctor Doom would, whatever he does, and the X-Men would be there. In other words, everyone lives in the same world. There are superheroes everywhere, and they meet up and do things all the time. And I think once you had a mainstream audience throughout the world, really, that were used to the idea of superheroes, it was the perfect time for The Boys to come along. Because you think about it, whenever any subject becomes popular, eventually there'll be something that comes along that mocks it and attacks it.
Yeah.
And that's The Boys in a nutshell. The Boys says superheroes are bastards, they need a slap, and the boys are the ones who are going to do it. I mean, that's so simple. That's your Hollywood logline right there.
So, Herogasm. There's been rarely any book that I said like, how the hell did you get away with this? And Herogasm was probably like on top of it because it was still done by a larger publisher. It's, beautiful covers by Derek Robertson, and then you open the book and you see all these depraved, massive like orgies of superheroes doing weird stuff. How much of this is you, John, and how much is it Garth?
It's all him.
That's not true. That's not true. I think there was a lot of stuff in that where, again, I looked at it and thought, oh, fuck. So a good deal of that was him.
There's one bit of it that I really have regret, though, because I missed a trick, is, are there kids in the audience? Oh well. Anyway, when there was a woman being fucked by a dog, and I forgot to draw a little crypto cape onto the dog, and I was like, I missed a trick there. Damn, that would have really made me more popular with DC if I'd done that, and
Well,
then I'd have got more work in DC Comics.
Yes. Well, I think at one point, Dog Welder was going to dog weld Crypto Ace the Bat Hound. Have I got that right? But obviously that wasn't going to happen. Herogasm came about because with my disdain for superheroes, one of the superhero stories I like least is the big company crossover. John and I had to actually take part in a few of those when we were doing Hitman, and it was annoying as piss.
But you made the best of it. Hitman 1 Million or that Dark Knight, Final Night, whatever. They're
Yes.
beautiful, perfect issues of basically using the best of the
Exactly.
whatever you've been given. But I understand how annoying it is because it puts
Pretty much
puts a
ignoring
whole
what you were given.
story and into the
Yeah.
flow, and you have to shoehorn in whatever.
So that's why when it came time to do the boys' version of one of those things, I just sort of thought, okay, well, every time there's a crossover, the superheroes all get together and they meet up and they fight whatever it is the threat is, and then everything goes back to normal. And I thought, well, what if they said they were all going off to fight an intergalactic threat on another planet, but actually they were just flying to a tropical island and fucking each other silly? That seems rather more likely to me. And that's where Herogasm came from. The name comes from, I saw a shoe store in New York called Shoegasm, and I thought, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. And then I thought, no, wait a minute, that's kind of brilliant. Herogasm.
And I can, after this, safely assume like Highland Letty was also like immediately written for John.
Yeah, I mean, at that point I knew that John was going to be doing the mini-series, but also some stuff on the regular book. You ended up doing quite a lot of Huey stuff because one of the arcs you did on the regular book was where he goes to Mallory and finds out the secret history. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
I think I ended up being
tanks
about
going
a
over
fifth a fifth of all the issues or something like that.
That sounds about right, yeah.
Surprises me.
Yeah, and then there was the sort of double issue you did with Russ, where you and he kind of traded off. Yeah.
Acting. Yeah. I mean, one of my big regrets is turning down The Boys. You actually, after Hitman ended, Garth rang me up and said, I've got this idea for another book called The Boys, do you want to draw it? And I, much to my regret, said, no, I'm knackered, I just want to draw a couple of shorter things. And
Wholesome superhero comics.
yes,
Pictures of Venom.
Well, I just was knackered at the end of drawing Hitman, so I just didn't feel up to like 60 issues or whatever. But as it turned out, it took so long to gestate through that I probably could have done it. And you know, my wife never stops smacking me around the back of the head for that choice. Oh well.
Do you think you'll ever do like something long form together?
I don't see myself doing any long form books again at all. I'm far more comfortable with miniseries and one shots. John's drawing one of mine right now, but it's a 40-page one shot, and after that we're going to do another one shot with another character. But I couldn't see myself committing to 60 issues of anything again.
I'm too tired. I'm an old guy and I'm fucking tired.
That was definitely. I need to ask because I think a lot of the people are the fans of the show. After us, we're going to have Karen come out. But I wanted to ask, you have someone, it's like someone in the show that's your favorite. You say like, oh my god, like I should have done what they're doing now with the TV show because it's slightly different than the book.
Well, I think that Anthony Starr absolutely
made it in his own.
nails the Homelander. I met Anthony a couple of times, and he's got a real sort of quite blithe exuberance for life. He's got a very infectious sense of humour. I really enjoyed meeting him, but I think he absolutely nails the Homelander. Who, just the cruelty of the guy, the petty cruelty, the meanness, like the spiteful little teenage boy in a man's body, a Superman's body.
Definitely. Do you watch it?
After I got long COVID, I couldn't watch anything that made me jump. All my horror movies, etc., I couldn't watch them anymore because it gave me heart palpitations, and the exploding heads on the boys was just what did it for me. I watched the first season, and then there was a courtroom bit where just everybody's head exploded, and I was just like, no, I can't. I'm out. I can't do this anymore. I nearly had a heart attack. So no, I don't watch it anymore. Sorry.
It happens. Any other project that's being turned into? So how are we doing with the Cross movie or series?
The Cross movie is being edited right now.
Ooh.
That was shot last year, towards the end of last year. At any given point, most of the stuff we do together and separately is being looked at by someone in Hollywood, and occasionally, it goes a bit further. I've had nice option money on a number of projects that never went any further, but that was true of Preacher and The Boys for a long time as well. So you can be pretty sure that someone's looking at something at any given time, and right now there are 2 or 3 things in development which may come off, may not.
Yeah, I just had a Universal option on Dead Eyes, but they optioned it twice, and then, yeah, it's not going to happen now. So I guess Jerry's going to talk to somebody else.
I actually wanted to say this on stage that Dead Eyes ruined wiping my butt forever.
Sorry, pardon?
Dead Eyes has ruined wiping my ass forever.
Sure, okay.
So
Well,
read it and you'll understand it.
I'm
There's a
happy.
splash page.
There's a splash.
Well, we're out of time. I want to thank you full-heartedly for joining us here. Give us a huge applause. Thank you so much. We're downstairs in the main floor. Thank you so much for coming, and give it up for Karen. Thank you.
可以现在